weekend is not complete without the First Lady of New York Radio. It's the Joan Hamburg Show. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Welcome to the Joan Hamburg Show. And don't forget our podcast. If you miss any of the show, maybe you're not around or you're going somewhere. Anyway, you can find it because we podcast this show. And we also have another podcast called Let Me Tell You. And we have a lot of great guests. In fact, today's show, we've got Daniel Silver, one of my favorite writers, a great thriller writer with a brand new book called The Cellist. Extraordinary adventure through Russia, dirty money, assassinations, democracy in America. It's got everything. Wonderfully done, as usual. And one of my favorite actresses, Christine Baranski, who's on her 5th season of The Good Fight, just starting now, streaming on Paramount Plus. And she, too, extraordinary. Grew up in a Polish-American family, surrounded by music and dance and all those good things, and came to Juilliard in New York. But she has an amazing career and is so much fun to be with and listen to. I think you're going to enjoy it. I've got to tell you, I collect all kinds of information. So someone sent me this. There's a chapel, a Brooklyn, Vegas-style chapel called Sweethearts, and it's popping up in Manhattan. You won't believe this. At New York's Katz Delicatessen, 205 East Houston Street, only on Saturday, August 28th. So couples can share their love for one another over pastrami at the landmark New York City Deli, and a good place, they claim, for a wedding, a commitment, a vow renewal ceremony. Go on to sweethearts.nyc, and it's with Katz's Deli, 75-minute heart spot, a ceremony right there, a photography session, maybe even honeymoon suggestions, pastrami and corned beef for the couple and 6 guests, $2,500. Give your loved ones a salami, a pastrami. Anyway, only in New York, but I thought you would get a kick out of that. We've got a wonderful Sunday show, so settle down and enjoy.
The First Lady of New York Radio.
This is Joan Eats.
Come on along with me on one of our food adventures. So we went to visit a place in Amagansett, Long Island, New York, at 429 Cranberry Hole Road. It's called Multi-Aquaculture Systems. It's a big name, Multi-Aquaculture Systems. And we've known about it for years as the fish farm. You go there and they have all these tanks with live seafood in them. They have fresh seafood and prepared seafood. They're known all over the island because it's right there. I mean, even salmons are swimming around. And right there, you can get the freshest fish, freshly farmed oysters, lobsters, clams, and many of them pulled right from the sea and prepared there. And otherwise, just go to the tanks where they have live seafood. And they also have prepared food. They offer baked goods, all kinds of things. And they have picnic tables. I'm sort of looking for these kind of places where you're not in crowded restaurants and, packed in there, where you can sit outside, enjoy the air, enjoy the adventure of it. Or a lot of people I noticed were bringing home prepared food or buying fresh fish. It's a perfect, if you're coming out and you want to visit this part of the world even for the day, what a great place to stop for lunch. A lobster roll with fresh lobster right there. And remember, it's called Multi-Aquaculture Systems. 631-267-3341, and they're open from 9 to 6:30, 7 days a week. Come say hello and buy yourself yummy fish.
Taking you behind the curtain. It's the Joan Hamburg Show. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
I remember reading a while ago that in an interview, wonderful actress Christine Baranski had talked about the 80s and what a fabulous time it was in her life, an incredible year. But in following Christine's career, there have been a lot of terrific moments. In fact, we're now celebrating season 5 of The Good Fight. And you know, Christine, the first time I saw this was almost by accident. I was sort of flipping around the television and this show appeared with you, and I had seen The Good Wife, and it says The Good Fight, and I am mesmerized. I ran to the phone and called my son, who's in the movie business, and said, quick, you've got to hear this. This is one of the best written things I've ever seen on TV. And it was The Good Fight.
I agree.
And now
Yeah,
5
I
seasons
agree.
later, you have a few new cast members this time, but it's an extraordinary show. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very proud of the show. I give almost all of the credit to Robert and Michelle King, who really are just such brilliant writers, and I think they're the only writers currently writing in television and perhaps film who are actually keeping up with the world in which we live, which, as we know, the last many years has been a pretty crazy world politically and culturally, and there are so many issues. And these characters, they live in the present tense, and the Kings somehow managed to keep surfing extraordinary events that impact the lives of these people in the law firm. And the show is intelligent and thoughtful and provocative, and this season especially, I think it's audacious and funny. And the other great thing about it is we have not only a great cast, but we have the most extraordinary revolving door on great actors who come in and do, you know, guest appearances, and they play lawyers and judges or eccentric, you know, criminals, whatever. And we just have our pick of the finest New York actors. So I've been doing this role for 12 years, the role of Diane Lockhart, and I've had the privilege of working with the Kings now for 12 years. And it's just been extraordinary. People are finally discovering this show after 5 years, and they're going, wow, this is really, really smart.
You know, and the show is so smart. When Trump didn't get reelected, I thought, what are they going to do in this show now? And you are absolutely right on. Everything that's going on is in this show. You're really watching like real time when you guys are doing it.
It's you know, as hard as it was to live through the Trump years, he was like a character on the show, and he was a great villain for my character to be up against. But since he left office, it's not as though the world has settled down. We've had January 6th, we've had Black Lives Matter. The nation continues to be traumatized. There's so much rich material there because we're living in such, you know, interesting, harrowing times. It's not like we are bereft without Donald Trump. We're still feeling the effects of a post-Trump presidency.
Exactly. And your new cast members, too, add to the depth of this show. That isn't always easy when you bring new people in. And I love that Mandy Patinkin is part of your crew now.
Well, I mean, Mandy and I go back to Juilliard. We were students at Juilliard.
Did he go to Juilliard with you?
Well, he wasn't in my class. He was a few classes below mine. And then we did the workshop of Sunday in the Park together. And we have a theater history. You know, we're theater animals. And there he was on the set. And I thought, oh, God, this is, you know, so often in the show, I wind up working with people with whom I'd worked in the theater. But Mandy is just perfect for this role in which he plays this judge. He creates his own kangaroo court. And it uses so many of his marvelous skills, his intelligence and his quirkiness. And, you know, he's a very committed, passionate actor. So he was just a great, great gift to our show this year.
Right. And a gift to all of us watching this. You know, it was interesting that to hear you grew up in Buffalo, but you attended Juilliard, which is, of course, the theater school. And Friends of mine who went to Juilliard during those times said it was so hard, so difficult. They cried almost every day. But you survived Juilliard.
Well, I did survive Juilliard. As I said in several articles, I always thought if you could survive the competition and that sense of being constantly judged and criticized, that was Juilliard, that the professional theater was easy. Not that theater is easy or the profession is easy, but it was particularly tough back in the 70s. The drama division had just opened. I was only the third class in. But do I regret it? I just got great training. I think the reason I've had such a long and varied career is because I was trained to play all kinds of different roles, character roles. We were always doing, we would go from, doing Shaw to doing Shakespeare, Restoration plays, Sam Shepard. We were just always in production for something. We were always working on our voice and our speech. And when I left, I felt that I had really solid training. You know how they say if you have classical ballet training, it never leaves you. It was the equivalent of that kind of classical training, that then you have it for, you know how to work on a role. I had great teachers, and you know how to use your voice and your body. And let's face it, 8 shows a week is not every actor is skilled. It has the skill set to do 8 shows a week for 6 months or 9 months. It takes real, stamina and a skill set. So I don't have any regrets that I chose that school or that they chose me. I was very, very lucky.
Yeah. And, growing up in Buffalo, not every kid knows about schools like Juilliard.
Well, I read about it in the paper. I read the Buffalo Evening News. I remember cutting the article out, pasting it on my wall, and saying, "That's my goal. That's where I want to go." And I didn't get in at first because I had this, what they call a sibilant S. It means like the slight whistle or a thick sound to your S. And they didn't want to let me in because they thought that was a very hard sound to correct. So they said if I had my teeth capped, because I had a groove in between my teeth, if I had my teeth capped, did a summer of speech therapy, and then re-auditioned. So I did that. My poor mom, she couldn't, I don't know how much it was. It was $500. It was so much money for her to do my dental work for me. Plus we had to incur the cost of the speech therapy, private speech. And then I went with my mom, and I went up to John Hausman's office, and the voice and speech teacher was there, and she listened to me do a page full of words, nothing but S's. So funny.
That is it's so funny. But also,
well, everybody has funny showbiz stories, but I loved Maya. Then my mom and I kind of got drunk together when they told me I'd gotten in. The voice teacher approved. Then we went to the Algonquin and had a couple of Southern Comfort Manhattans. It's the only time I got drunk with my mother. When I say drunk, we had
your grandparents, I think I read, were performers, actors in the Polish theater.
I know. And I remember, unfortunately, I didn't ever meet my grandfather, who was very dashing, but my grandmother lived with us, and she was utterly vivacious woman. Everybody adored her. She, I always said she was like my Auntie Mame. She loved singing and dancing, and my father and grandma wanted me to study ballet. So at an early age, I studied ballet, but they loved the performing arts. And she had her own radio show. She wrote
I read that. I think that was incredible. Polish radio.
Show. Yeah. So, it's in my background.
Absolutely. But after Juilliard, there was a lot of theater. And then what happened? You did a lot of Broadway.
Well, way before Broadway, I didn't even attend my graduation at Juilliard because I'd already been asked to work at the American Shakespeare Theater, and I did A Lady in Waiting and understudied Elizabeth Ashley and Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I just started working immediately, and then I did many years of regional theater, which I loved, going to all these different cities, Baltimore, Washington, Philly. I just was always doing usually classical plays and using my newly found skills. But then I made my way to New York and started doing off Broadway. And then because I did this workshop with Mandy of Sunday in the Park, Mike Nichols was in the audience the final night, and he saw me. And then I got to audition for him, and I got the role in The Real Thing that won us all Tony Awards. And then it was then I was a Broadway actress for about 10 years. And I was really asked often to consider television, and I just kept saying no until my early 40s. So, yeah, most of my career was theater, and now it's amazing how long I've had a television career.
So, and all this time, you were married, children, and that's a lot to deal with. Plus, you didn't always live on top of where you worked. So how did you come to grips with all of that and make it work for you?
Well, it is indeed a very, very challenging thing to do. The reason I said no to television until I was in my 40s is I never wanted to work in LA, and that's where most television was happening, except for Law and Order. There were no shows, especially comedies, being done in New York. So I remained in the theater, and also it got expensive to live in New York in the 80s. So my late husband, Matthew, and I moved to Connecticut. He had inherited his childhood home, a lovely 18th century farmhouse in a rural part of northwestern Connecticut.
How great.
So we raised the kids here, but it did mean that I would have to commute in and out to New York when I did theater for that decade. So I'd take a 4:15 bus from Southbury, Connecticut. I'd arrive at the Port Authority, walk to the theater, do my Broadway show, whatever it was, and then get an 11:15 bus home and get in at 1. And, I do this 3 times a week, and other times I'd stay with my father-in-law the night before a matinee. And then when I reluctantly went to television because it was clear we weren't going to pay the big tuition bills on a theater salary. Then I commuted to Los Angeles and kept the kids here. We kept the kids in Connecticut, which I don't regret. But, yeah, I had a lot of miles on me.
I'm telling you, you look great.
Well, those were stressful years. And I often say only another woman who, actresses who have children, it's a very tough choice. What do you do? Do you leave your children? I had a husband who was happy for the most part to be with the kids, and I had a wonderful lady who lived with us all those years. But, do you take your kids on different jobs? Do you take them all over, or you just keep them in the same school? And, any actress who does 8 shows a week for 6 months and goes home to her kids knows that you're just dead tired. Those years were exhausting. And, my main piece of advice for working women, no matter what you do, is you need your health, you need your stamina, above all.
And what's difficult is that even though many of us were working during those years with the children, like I still had time to commiserate with girlfriends who were living the same life. But when you're doing 8 shows a week or whatever, you don't have that kind of extra.
No, I didn't. I'll tell you, the Broadway thing was one thing, but when we made the decision that I was going to do this show, Sybil, and we wouldn't move the kids. We'd see how it went. So I would go back and forth to LA, and I'd take the red eye, and I'd get home, and suddenly I was off doing activities with the kids, and I had 10 days off to catch up and be with the kids, and then I'd go off again. I didn't know anybody who had that life. I had a couple of wonderful girlfriends who, helped me with the kids, and they were empathetic, but I didn't know any crazy woman who was
living like you.
What I was doing.
And you married an actor too.
I did. I married a wonderful actor, and I think in many ways he allowed me to, because he could see I was getting big opportunities. And although he did work and eventually started writing, which was great, he was happy to live in his childhood home and to raise these beautiful daughters. But I do think that, he stepped aside and might have done more, but he allowed for the fact that my career just had so much momentum.
Right. I'm talking to Christine Baranski, and we're celebrating the 5th season of The Good Fight. And actually, there's a new little object coming up, the Gilded Age, but that's not for a little while, right?
Yes, we finished filming The Gilded Age, but it won't appear on HBO until 22. So there's a bit of a wait, but God, that was a marvelous experience. Once again, every Tony Award-winning actor is playing a role in The Gilded Age, and it's written by Julian Fellows, who wrote Downton Abbey, and this is, a period piece about that time in American history just after the Civil War when the robber barons were, making a lot of money and people were building extravagant mansions. And it's life in New York back in the 1880s. And so I've always wanted to do a period piece on film, period work, and I never did. So I get to do, wear the corset and the wig and the dialogue written by
how much
Lord
fun.
Fellows. And it's so much fun. I really get to use a lot of my Juilliard training.
It's great. And you're working with Audra McDonald again and Cynthia Nixon.
Well, imagine being on a show where on The Good Fight, Audra's my main colleague. We're the two women in the firm. And then Cynthia Nixon plays my sister on the other show. So, how lucky am I? I'm the luckiest actress. I've got these incredibly talented women that I'm working with, and, in the hands of two great television writers. Three, really, Robert and Michelle and Julian.
Right. It's all exciting. Do either of the girls want to go into theater, our actresses?
Lily, my youngest, is on a show called Roswell. It's on the WB, the Warner Brothers Network.
Good for her.
And she goes back to work she'll be starting her 4th season. Isabel is a writer. She chose not to go the way of her mom. I think she saw how hard my life was and decided. She gave me 3 beautiful grandsons and is a writer.
Oh, how
she's,
thrilling.
but I've got, and they're waiting for me at the beach now. I'm on my way to the beach, Joan. How about that?
You're taking them to the beach today?
Yes.
It's perfect. And it's a good hot day to do that too. So you're doing more and more when people say that people of a certain age can't get work. Not true.
Not true. They should talk to me. My career only got better. Seriously, I did television. I started television career in my 40s. I started doing leading roles in musicals in my 50s, and now I'm in my 60s and doing 2 major television shows and enjoying the work more than ever. And I think people, I hate the expression of a certain age, but we have a lot more to give because we have so much life experience, and we also have a more refined sense of humor about life. And I'm having as good a time as I ever have, and I'm also a lot less hard on myself and on the world. I'm more easygoing.
Well, because those tough years, even with all the success, dealing with children and trying to make a life and trying to be something to everyone is a pretty impossible task, but you did it.
Well, I did. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful on so many levels. But yes, when I look back, honestly, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I commuted to LA for 3.5 years and kept all the balls in the air because, it's children and a marriage and your career and you have to make decisions. Sometimes you only have a few days to decide whether to do a television show or a play that's going to take up 6 months or many years of your life. You don't have a lot of time to think about it. You have to make these decisions. But I've had a wonderful representation. I've been with the same manager for, I think 30 years now, Lisa Loosemore, and I've been blessed to have a lot of great people in my life. So that matters too.
Right. And you had a great partner who really understood and wanted it for you.
And, because he was an actor, he understood how, when I remember being offered Sweeney Todd, and my mother was living with me, and she was suffering from cancer. So I also had my mother to look after in her later years. And I was offered Sweeney Todd, and I said to Matthew, I don't think I can do it. It was at the Kennedy Center, and I don't think I can do it with Mom and the kids. And he said, you've been offered a chance to work to do Sweeney Todd with Stephen Sondheim. That's like playing for the New York Yankees. You can't say no to that. So he understood.
How right he was.
And we made it work, but he was generous in that way because he was an artist. He understood that when you have great opportunities, you take them if you're an artist.
You have to, because they don't come that often.
No, they don't. And you never know when they'll come. And they can come out of the blue, and they can come at the most inconvenient time. When Lily says to me, I don't know how I'm going to have a baby and a career, and I said, there's never a convenient time to have a baby. Who would have
of course.
It's the most inconvenient thing in the world. But I had two beautiful daughters, and, it all.
And they're productive and wonderful human beings. So it did work out in the end. If you could go back to theater, though, I don't know how, with all the TV shows and everything, would that be on the wish list now?
Oh, yes. I would love to do something on the stage again. Eventually, if I can keep it together, and when these television shows, they're not going to last forever. If I'm alive and kicking, I'll get out there. I'll be back on the boards.
Oh, I want to thank you so much for sharing today. We're excited about hooray for the 5th season of The Good Fight. You've got to see it. It's really not only beautifully acted, it's so real that it's hard to believe you're watching a television story. It incorporates.
Yeah, no.
Right?
And I think, honestly, our season 5 is the best season. So if you've never watched it before, just tune in and watch this season, and then you can work your way backwards. As you say, it's so smart and it's so thought-provoking. I'm really proud to be a part of it.
And I have a feeling that your wonderful people behind it really get you and know you, because they capture the essence of Christine Baranski. Funny.
Well, I've been
right
doing
out
it
there
for 12 years, so they now know my strengths, and they know my sense of humor, and they will often write for things that they know I can do. And then I've had wonderful chemistry with various actors, with the guy who plays my husband, Gary Cole. They like to write scenes between us because we have a great chemistry as actors. So, there's a lot to be said for a long run of anything in the theater or in television, because it allows things to develop and grow and deepen. So, if you can do 12 years of a character on television, you've just basically beaten the odds. There are very few people who have that long a run as a single character.
Right. And she's getting better and better all the time.
Well, I'd like
to
think
Christine.
I'm improving. I'm improving with age, but thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I loved having you. The Good Fight, and of course, The Gilded Age is coming, but right now we can be very happy watching one of television's best. Continued success and luck to you and your family.
Thank you, dear. Thank you. You too. Have a lovely summer. Bye.
Bye. I'm Joan Hamburg, and you're listening to WABC, and you've been listening to Christine Baranski.
Taking you behind the curtain. It's the Joan Hamburg Show. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
I always want Daniel Silva, the great New York Times bestselling author of at least 24 novels, to write faster. And when finally we got a call that there was a new book called The Cellist, I can't tell you how excited I was. And how many people said, oh, put me on the list to get the book. I said, go buy the book. The guy needs a few bucks from you. Go take care of it. And this is truly his new book. All the books have been bestsellers everywhere. And this one, every time I read one, I say, no, this is extraordinary. But this book is so now. It's like he just dropped into our lives, telling us about everything that's going on, what's going on in the West today, giving us the whole inside deal with dirty money at Russia, the anxiety about democracy, about what has happened during the Trump time. And of course, thrilling. There's always appointments with death with Daniel's characters. So Daniel, this book takes place in London. And amazing, because you always go everywhere when you do your books, but because of the pandemic, you probably couldn't go to a lot of locations.
No, this the second book that I've been desk bound. My last book was set at the Vatican, or largely at the Vatican. I had hoped to go to Rome to finish that book last year. Wasn't able to do that. Fortunately, I mean, I'm very familiar with the places that in which the book is set. It's set to a large extent in Geneva, a city I know well. By the way, I would have loved to have spent a couple of weeks in Geneva writing. There's a big climactic sequence in the French ski resort of Courchevel, where I've spent time as well. So it's an aspect of research and writing and work that I really do miss. I am hopeful of some travel and some research in the near future, but I have to say I'm getting a little edgy about the Delta variant. So we'll see how that goes.
I'm talking to Daniel Silver, the cellist, his brand new novel. And of course, we find out right in the beginning that there has been a murder, a poisoning, and it's Viktor Orlov. He was once one of the richest men in Russia, and was no slouch, living in exile in London. His problem was that the president of Russia didn't want him around anymore. And even though he was very closely guarded, you would think nothing could happen to this guy. They got him. And that's where it all starts. And Gabriel Orlov sort of owed him because he had saved his life. And Gabriel is one of your wonderful characters. So tell me a little bit about the story of Victor and Gabriel and how this all started rolling along.
Well, Victor makes his debut many, many years ago in a book called The Defector, and he has appeared in, I guess, 2 or 3 books since then. And without spoiling too much of The Defector, he surrenders a gigantic oil company to the Kremlin in order to get Gabriel out of Russia. Gabriel and his wife and Mikhail Abramov, another a member of Gabriel's operational team. And so Gabriel really, really owes his life to Viktor Orlov. And Victor has worked with Gabriel on a number of important operations. And it appears that Victor has been poisoned by a prominent investigative reporter who works on a newspaper that he owns. And that the operational working theory inside British intelligence is that this woman is actually a Russian intelligence officer who has penetrated Victor's inner circle and killed him. Gabriel does not accept that proposition. He sets out to find the truth, conducts a very Gabriel thorough investigation, and soon finds himself in a desperate race to stop an attack that would plunge the United States into absolute political turmoil and leave Russia unchallenged on the world stage. And so it is a fast-paced, entertaining summer beach read that's filled with art, music, and corrupt Russian oligarchs and dirty European bankers. But it deals with a very serious and incredibly timely topic, and that is the influence of Russian money, the corrupting influence of Russian money on the institutions of the West and upon our democracy itself.
And, the private group, the things that Gabriel Allon finds, they're true, right? Is the Hayden group.
You know what? As I like to do at the end of my book, I point out what's true and what's not true. So what are some of the true things in this novel? Truth number 1, Vladimir Putin is quite likely one of the richest people in the world. Truth number 2, he doesn't really hold a great deal of that wealth personally. It is being held for him by a trusted inner circle of oligarchs and old friends. Truth number 3, Vladimir Putin decided very early on, after seizing power in Russia, that he was going to in order to prop up his own position, in order to help regain Russia's lost empire, regain Russian power, that the way to do that was to destabilize the West. And he began working on that right away. And so he borrowed the playbook of the old KGB: active measures, disinformation, propaganda, subversion. But he has a powerful new weapon in his arsenal because of the oil wealth of the Russian state, and that is money. And they decided very early on that they were going to use money as a weapon to destabilize the West. And as I was beginning the book, the British government released a really landmark white paper called the Russia Report. And to their credit, the British government acknowledged that Russian money had completely contaminated and undermined the British political system. That Russian money had completely contaminated the British financial industry. That British bankers and accountants and lawyers were witting or unwitting Russian assets in this war on the West. And the British government acknowledged that it missed the signs of this. If they'd been reading my books, they might have noticed, because I've been writing about this for some time. And I think that if we were to undertake a similar study, we would see the corrupting influence of Russian money in our own situation right now.
Yeah, and as you say, when people think about weapons and Russia, you point out in this unbelievable book that it's really money, and that's what's affecting all of us too. But no one thinks like that until they read you.
As I write in the book, a nuclear bomb can be used once, but money is a weapon that can be used over and over again with no fallout, and it leaves very few traces, and they have. In the UK, for example, the British government found that an incredibly large number of the House of Lords that were either openly doing business with the Russians or secretly doing business with the Russians. So they're corrupted, they're compromised, and that's what the Russians are doing. They are corrupting and compromising people in key positions in order to get them to do their bidding and to make us lose faith in our system. One of the other tools that they're using their money for is to fund destabilizing politicians in these countries, people who want to blow up the system, people who want to blow up NATO, people who want to undermine the European Union. People like Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump said very clearly that he wanted the United States out of NATO. Can you imagine that? And so why wouldn't the Russians, support a politician like that? And they did it in Europe, and then they did it in the United States.
But Putin understood this, the power of money as a weapon, from the beginning. But
absolutely.
Do you think, you talk about the fact that, undermining our democracy and any democracy, that for Putin, behind it all is this desire for vengeance, for getting back. But I didn't understand what the vengeance was.
The vengeance is the fall of the Soviet Union. He blames the United States for the collapse of the Soviet Union. And remember that Russia was one republic in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So they lost 14 pieces of their country, went their separate ways when or most of them did. Ukraine, a key part of the old Soviet Union, independent country, or the Baltic states. Putin famously called the collapse of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. And you can't understate the degree to which he wants his empire back. He knows that he is unlikely that he will ever be able to recapture the old Soviet empire territorially, but that doesn't mean that he can't be the dominant player over all of the lands of the old Soviet Union, and that is what he is trying to do. And NATO is a stumbling block, is a restraining influence on that ambition, and he would love nothing more than to make NATO go away or to weaken NATO. And one of the things that I write about in the author's note of the book, and one of the new revelations in the brand new book by Carol Leonnig and Phil Rucker of the Washington Post, is that if Donald Trump had been reelected, the United States was out of NATO. He was going to withdraw from NATO, period.
Putin is always talking about the fact that he doesn't have any real goods. He doesn't really have any money, has a little apartment and everything. But that's not true, right?
That's not true. That's not true. Bill Browder, the American financier, says that he is the richest man in the world, and that we're talking about not just a little richer than Jeff Bezos, but maybe 2 or 3 times as rich as Jeff Bezos. I'm not so sure about that, but there is an extraordinary amount of money, and I would say that with the exception of a very small bit of it, it's all hidden outside Russia. It has all been laundered and exported to the West. I'm sitting in my hotel room on Columbus Circle looking out over Central Park in Manhattan, and I assume that Vladimir Putin owns a fair amount of property in this city, and not under his name, of course, but through fronts and shell corporations. We allow anonymous purchases of property in the United States. I assume that he's a major property owner in London, a major property owner in the United States. He has investments in American companies, investments around the world, all done for him by very skilled money launderers, many of whom are British American. They don't necessarily know who they're laundering money for, but he's got a network of people who do his bidding, and therefore they are wittingly or unwittingly helping him to undermine the West.
I'm talking to Daniel Silver, his brand new book, The Cellist. Let me just ask you which was amazing to me, that the book was real. It was everything that happened here was in the book, from the riots on January 6th to all this stuff. And how did you know that before, when you're in the middle of writing the book or almost finished? You can't look into a crystal ball. How did you know there was going to be violence and all of the other things that you wrote about in a very difficult time constraint?
Let's just say that I feared the worst as I started this book last summer. I knew that democracy and the fate of democracy was going to be the story of 2021. I just feared the worst. I am very plugged in Washington. My wife is a journalist for CNN. She broke some major news this week on this front. I was hearing some dark stuff. Obviously, I could not have foreseen how bad it was actually going to be. But I kept one eye on the domestic situation here in the United States as I was working on the book. That said, I did not plan to include the Capitol insurrection and the inauguration of a new American president in the book. I did not plan to do that. And, I'm on January 6th, I'm in late stages of my typescript. I'm working towards the ending. I'm on deadline. I do not have a TV in my office. The computer that I write on does not have an internet connection. I don't want to be interrupted. And my wife calls me and says, you got to go upstairs and turn on the TV. I says, I don't want to. I'm writing. I'm working. She says, go turn on the television. I go up to the kitchen, and I see that an American president has, incited an attack on a co-equal branch of government, thousands of people rampaging through the temple of American democracy. I stood there in horror, watching the television late into the morning, or late into night and early morning when we got the election safely certified. And when I woke up, I just resolved that I have to write about this. I must write about
So
this.
what did you do? You wrote a whole new book?
Exactly. I did.
I can't believe that.
I threw out my existing ending that I was planning to write. So I wrote a whole new second half of the book. So I got that finished, but the problem is it didn't match the first half of the book, what I had written. So I basically had to once I got the new back half written, I really had to rewrite the entire book again in a period of about 6 weeks. Then I did a sort of a second draft in TypeScript after handing in. I made major changes and revisions and rewrites all through the production process. I finished, I think, the last set of corrections on June 1st. And the last change I made was I dedicated the book to the men and women of the Capitol Police and the Metropolitan Police Force who defended our democracy on that day.
To hear more about Daniel Silva's thriller, The Cellist, and what's going on in the world and rogue nations in Russia and assassinations and dirty money and all the things that, believe me, are taking place all the time, right up to this minute. For the rest of this story, go to the podcast. Let me tell you, you're not going to believe what Daniel Silva writes about. And you know what? Most of it, even though it's fiction, is true.
The First Lady of New York Radio.
This is Ask Joan.
A friend told me that there are so many places in our city that offer free adventures, like kayaking. You can go to one of our best waterfront areas, like Hudson River Park, Governor's Island, or Brooklyn Bridge Park, and try to kayak. It's so much fun. And let me tell you, when you go to the downtown boathouse, they have two locations, Pier 26, Hudson River Park, North Moore Street, every Saturday, Sunday, and holiday through mid-October. Free, 10 a.m. to 4:30. And you make a reservation online at downtownboathouse.org. Free kayaking, about 20 minutes on the water. You get 10 minutes instruction, and you get the safety equipment, changing room, locker, bike locks, sunblocks, all kinds of equipment. The location is about a 2-mile walk or bike ride from the new little island in Hudson River Park, and that offers access at West 13th and 14th Street. Now, also, the downtown boathouse has free kayaking on Governor's Island through July on Saturday from 11 to 3:30, downtownboathouse.org. Walk up only, no reservations. I couldn't believe all these places. Manhattan Community Boathouse, free kayaking, Pier 96, 56th Street, Hudson River Park, both Saturday and Sunday, noon to 5. And because they don't want it crowded, reservation only, manhattancommunityboathouse.org. And they, too, give you the life jacket, the paddle, the kayak, a locker. And then last, Brooklyn Bridge Park Boathouse, Pier 4 Beach in Brooklyn Bridge Park. And now through the end of August on Wednesdays, Thursdays 4:30 to 7, Saturdays 10 to 3, they offer Sunday free paddling for families. They teach children. There's a lot going on. So go to bbpboathouse.org. And they have public restrooms where you can change and bring the kids. But there are no lockers near Pier 4. So if you want to store your personal belongings, you need to either lock it in your car or have someone who can watch it for you. But it's a terrific thing to do when you're thinking, oh, sorry for myself, I'm stuck in the city. It's so much fun to kayak, to paddle, and everyone loves it. And it's a great opportunity to meet people. All right, guys, we did it again. We're coming up to the end of the show, but don't forget the Joan Hamburg Show every Sunday, starting at 2 o'clock, and go right to our podcast if you missed some of it. And don't forget, we have another podcast called Let Me Tell You. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I look forward to joining you again very shortly. I'm Joan Hamburg, and you're listening to WABC Radio.